Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. The review embargo for the RTX 3070 just lifted and I'm sure you are all eager to see the gaming benchmarks. The reviews overall were pretty positive and essentially you're getting 2080 Ti like performance at the $499 price point. Not bad at all considering the former would cost you around $1,100 to $1,200 US. So it definitely looks like Nvidia's performance claims here were met and validated. It's a fantastic card for high refresh rate 1080p and 1440p gaming and is also capable of doing 4K 60 depending on the title and settings. With this kind of performance at this price point, the 3070 is the best card on the market in terms of value. Its cost per frame is higher than anything we've seen so far. However, speaking of on the market, that is if you can actually find one in stock. Nvidia still looks like they're having trouble with supply issues for the RTX 3080 and 3090, and while we're hearing from different sources and retailers around the world that the RTX 3070 supply seems to be better, there is also going to be much higher demand as cheaper GPUs generally sell a lot more, and like I had mentioned, the RTX 3070 is just such a great value GPU in terms of performance per dollar you're getting. With that said though, in this video I wanted to go over a great gaming build that comes in at around that $1,500 price point. I've comprised a list of parts that you can easily pick up yourself from Amazon in order to complete this awesome gaming rig. I decided to stick with just one retailer as it'll make it easy to attain all the parts, and there will be links down below in the video description for all the parts that I mentioned. However, feel free to use something like PC Part Picker to reference prices from other stores of your choosing. Also, do keep in mind that prices will vary depending on when and where you're watching this video. So all that aside, let's get right into this build. I always like to start off with the CPU as the first part of the build, and here I will be choosing the upcoming Ryzen 5 5600X. Now I know this part isn't released yet and we still have to wait for benchmarks to validate performance, but it's fairly obvious with the advancements AMD have made with the Zen 3 architecture that these CPUs will perform exceptionally well for gaming. If you're interested in learning more about these CPUs, then definitely check out my launch coverage. The reason why I've been keen on selecting this CPU is because it'll allow our build to offer optimal gaming performance by letting the GPU run at its full potential, as the 5600X shouldn't CPU bottleneck it thanks to its much higher single core performance, higher IPC, and lower latency. The Ryzen 5 5600X comes with 6 cores with SMT enabled for 12 threads, so it'll also be a very capable CPU in terms of doing video editing and streaming. Alternatively, if you want a processor that's out in the market right now, you can go for the Ryzen 7 3700X for around the same price, or if you don't need that many cores, there's always the Ryzen 5 3600. Both of those CPUs are also viable choices for this build, and in some cases you'll end up saving some money by opting for the previous gen CPUs. Just keep in mind you will be leaving a bit of performance on the table due to a higher CPU bottleneck at 1080p and a little bit less at 1440p, but it shouldn't be anything too dramatic. Moving on, and I decided, just like with my RTX 3080 build, we'll be going with an aftermarket cooler, and the reason why I decided to stick with an aftermarket cooling solution as opposed to a stock in-box cooler is because if you are going for the Ryzen 5 5600X, this time around I believe it only comes with a Wraith Stealth cooler. I'm not sure what AMD was thinking with that move, but the Stealth isn't that great of a cooler and I honestly recommend upgrading it. So for this build, I'm going to be choosing the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 240mm AIO. This is an exceptional AIO liquid cooler which has been known to offer excellent cooling performance for Ryzen CPUs due to the way the large cold plate has been designed. Acoustics for this cooler are also excellent, and this cooler also has a VRM cooler, as a lot of AIOs don't often account for or provide VRM cooling like many air coolers do, but Arctic have implemented a rather creative solution to that problem, and it does help quite a bit with VRM cooling. Gamers Nexus have done an excellent review of these liquid freezer coolers, so I highly recommend checking them out. With lower temperatures, this will ensure our CPU will be able to sustain a higher boost frequency under load, thus providing optimal performance. At $99, this cooler offers great value and really is just a no-brainer at this point. Now moving on for the motherboard, we've got Gigabyte's B550 Aorus Elite. At $150, this is an excellent board that comes loaded with many useful features. It's got a 12 plus 2-phase VRM layout with 50 amp power stages, which should be more than enough for the 5600X in terms of power delivery, and should also provide a good amount of headroom for future upgrades. Along with that, you've got high memory overclocking support, which is very crucial for Ryzen systems, plenty of fan headers, PCIe 4.0, so it'll be fully compatible bandwidth-wise for our RTX RTX 3070 and Gen 4 NVMe drives. You've got a lot of ports in the I/O and lots of SATA ports for storage expansion. Also, this board does have a dedicated Q flash button, which is very crucial and important since we are going to be going with a Ryzen 5000 series CPU. In case you buy this motherboard and it doesn't come flashed with a BIOS that's 5000 ready, then you can simply flash it with a USB using that button and you'll be good to go, all without having a CPU installed. Now, the reason why I opted for a B550 board as opposed to an X570 board was for a few reasons. One, the B550 boards are just a lot more cost effective, especially for a gaming build where you won't be taking advantage of all those extra PCIe lanes. With that said though, for the average user, you'll still have plenty of options in regards to storage for the build. And build quality wise, as I just mentioned with the VRM design, rear I/O, and more, B550s practically give you like 90% of the features that X570 boards give you, and at a lower price point. You're much better off saving that money and putting it towards your GPU, more storage, or even for games, applications that you'll actually be using this system for. Next up, it's only appropriate I talk about my choice for RAM, since I just mentioned a motherboard with great memory support. For this component, I've chosen the Crucial Ballistics RGB. This is a 16GB kit with two 8GB DIMMs, and will come with a memory overclocking profile at 3600 MHz with 16, 18, 18, 38 primary timings. With this kind of configuration, it should definitely allow our Ryzen CPU to stretch its legs in gaming and therefore boost performance, as Ryzen benefits greatly from higher frequency memory thanks to being able to run its Infinity Fabric clock at higher speeds while maintaining a 1-to-1 ratio. Latency is also key here, and this kit should help reduce it significantly. As for capacity, 16GB is more than enough for games these days, as I found even the most demanding games aren't needing near that much. Along with that, 16GB should provide you with enough RAM to even use productivity and content creation programs. RAM has become quite cheap these days thanks to an oversupply, and at $88, this kit offers some really good value. Next up, we're going to be looking at our storage options. For the boot drive, since we're trying to keep the price a bit lower, I decided to go for the 500GB Western Digital Black SN750. Now, while this isn't a top tier Gen 4 NVMe, it's considered to be one of the fastest Gen 3 NVMe drives, which should be more than enough for a build like ours, and considering what the user will do with it. Like I mentioned in my previous build video, Gen 4 just isn't worth it for a gaming build unless you plan on doing some high-end 8K video editing or something else of that caliber. Now, 500GB, you're definitely gonna be a bit limited, so I recommend adding a secondary mass storage drive where you can store all your games and media. I'll give you guys two options here. The first option can be another SSD, except this time we'll go with a 2.5-inch SSD, which is a 1TB Crucial MX500. This drive, while not as fast as an NVMe, can still provide a major boost in regards to decreased load times at the expense of mass storage. For $114, you get a nice drive with read speeds of up to 560 megabytes per second, with a quality 3D NAND flash and a great silicon motion quality controller, making it a very reliable drive and fits in nicely with our gaming build. One of the reasons why I would recommend this over a traditional mechanical drive in a gaming build now is because games are getting pretty big these days with large maps and tons of assets to load. An SSD will be a much more preferred storage medium as opposed to a traditional spinner. Now, let's say you need a larger storage device because you are going to be recording, streaming, and editing gameplay. Well, in that case, I recommend a 2TB Seagate Barracuda for just $55. It's a decent drive for the price, you'll get lots of storage, and you save quite a bit of money there as well. Now, the next component we'll take a look at is the power supply. In my previous build, I went with a top-of-the-line 850 watt power supply simply due to how power-hungry the RTX 3080 can get. However, with the RTX 3070, it's a different story. On average, it looks like the RTX 3070 consumes about 220 to 230 watts under your typical gaming load. Therefore, we won't be needing a 850 watt power supply and can downscale a bit. So here I've chosen the EVGA GA650X1. This is a solid unit from them with a 80 plus gold efficiency rating, 100% Japanese caps, and a 10-year warranty. You can comfortably use this power supply in your build and have the peace of mind that you're going to be using something reliable. It's also got a modular cable design, preventing clutter and helping with cable management. At $98, this should fit in our build nicely. The second last component we have is the case, which will be responsible for housing all of these wonderful components and providing ample airflow to keep everything nice and cool. So for the case, really there isn't a set choice here. You can go with whatever suits your needs, as long as it can accommodate a full-size ATX board and can support large and long GPUs. Now, while the RTX 3070 Founders Edition model isn't quite as big as an RTX 3080, there will definitely be aftermarket AIB models, which I know some of you will opt for, which can be quite bulky and long. But yeah, as long as you're good good for dimensions and form factors, you can go for whatever you find appealing aesthetically. Now, I'm an airflow kind of guy. If there's a case that provides a lot of airflow to help with thermals, I don't particularly mind how it looks, but it's not like I totally ignore how something will look. For this build, I've chosen the Fantex Eclipse P400A Digital. At just $82, you're getting a lot from the case. It's got great aesthetics for a simple, clean look with RGB. It's got great cooling with 3 120mm fans in the front and has support for our 240mm AIO, a power supply shroud to hide the cables coming off of the unit and all that clutter, support for 6 3.5-inch hard drives and 8 2.5-inch SSDs, so lots of room for upgradability and future expansions. Finally, for our last component, the RTX 3070, the part which this whole build was catered around for. When we take into account all the parts and their respective prices, you end up with a system that's around $1,500 US. Obviously, with regional taxes and shipping costs, it could be a bit more or it could be a bit less, so your mileage may vary there. But for $1,500, like I mentioned, this is going to be one killer gaming build, enabling you to enjoy high refresh rate, 1080p and 1440p gaming with ultra settings, high settings, along with being able to enjoy high fidelity gaming at 4K. In addition, being able to utilize features such as DLSS and ray tracing, this build will be very capable in handling anything you throw at it. Along with that, I did mention how this build is capable for workstation tasks and content creation, so it's actually very versatile in that regard. So that is the $1,500 RTX 3070 build that I wanted to go over and recommend. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if you're interested in making this gaming PC and want to purchase the parts, you can use my affiliate links down in the video description below. I hope you guys found this video to be informative and helpful. Let me know your thoughts down below. Check out the video description on ways to support the channel and for my other videos. If you guys are interested in more content like this, then make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one.